The Haunting, a short, scary story, written by Stories from the Attic, narrated by Robin McConnell. Chris was a nice guy. He was friendly and well-liked. The managers at the Uncle Ducky's amusement park adored him, and so did the patrons. And why not? He was an ideal employee, honest, hard-working, a boss's dream. The kind of guy who'd rather cut off his tongue than break any of the company's rules. And that's why his co-workers had to kill him. The first plan was simple. It started with Derek and Brad slumped around the break room table, sweat dripping from their bodies. "All the money those jerks are making," Derek groaned. "You'd think they could afford air conditioning." Brad smirked. "Dude, we're pulling third world wages and you're complaining about heat? This place is a joke." Brad shoved both hands up his Insane Clown Posse t-shirt, then flapped it for ventilation. "It doesn't have to be that way, you know." "What do you mean?" Derek leaned in closer. "So, I'm talking to Trina the other day, right? And she tells me about how the place got robbed last summer. Guy comes in right after closing, wearing a mask, pulls a gun on her. You know her, right? Trina, the girl who counts the registers in the office." "Yeah, I know Trina." "Check this out. Trina just gives the guy all the money. No questions asked. Guy doesn't even have to shoot anybody. Doesn't need a plan, really. That's all he needs. A gun, a mask, and he gets all the money these jerks earn in a day." A smile slowly crept across Brad's face. "Nice." Derek let his friend's thoughts linger for a second, then he said, "Think about how easy it would be to fake a robbery." Brad chuckled. "Dude, how hard can it be? I can get a ski mask, a gun, we can talk Trina into it. She's on break in a few minutes." Brad nodded, but said nothing, his eyes crawling across the break room table, thinking about how nice all the money would be. 5 minutes later, Trina stepped into the break room, her Uncle Ducky t-shirt yanked into a makeshift halter top, red hair dripping with sweat. "Hey guys," she said, grabbing a Pepsi from the cooler, then falling into a seat near them. The guys exchanged glances like a couple of gossiping housewives with a secret. "What's up?" she asked. "Trina, how would you like to make thousands of dollars today?" Derek asked, his voice mimicking a late-night infomercial pitchman. Nose curled, she asked, "What are you talking about?" Derek said, "I'm talking about..." Brad lifted his hand, stopped him, then slowly and quietly backed out of his chair. He took cautious steps away from the table, past the furnace and toward the bathroom. After giving the bathroom door a knock, he poked his head inside. Seeing nothing, he moved back to the table. "Thought I heard something back there." "That's right. Chris is supposed to be on break now," Derek said. He'd said Chris's name in a facetiously hollow tone. Brad rolled his eyes. Knowing that guy, he's probably working through his break. That's the last guy we'd want in on this. "In on what?" Trina asked. Brad leaned toward her. "You're going to get robbed tonight." "What? By who?" "By us." Trina's face twisted into a mess, but she didn't stop anybody from talking. "All we need to do," Brad said, "is bag up all the cash at the end of the day, make a phone call to the cops, tell them you've been robbed. Cops get here, you tell them some sob story about some drunken idiot in a mask pulling a gun on you, and that's it." "That's it?" she asked, eyes twitching between Brad and Derek. "That's all?" Brad shrugged. "That's what happened last summer, right?" "Yeah, but that was different," Trina said. "How?" Derek asked. "Far as the cops know, it's the same story. They might even think it's the same guy striking a second time." Brad said, "Who's on manager shift this weekend? Mitch? He's already left for the night. You won't have to worry about him until tomorrow morning, and all you'll have to do is repeat the same story you said to the cops." Trina said nothing for a while, once again looking back and forth, almost searching for a joke. After nearly a minute of tense silence, she melted. "Let's do it." The guys shared a high five. Derek jabbed his hand under the couch cushion and pulled out a bag. With his face aglow, he displayed the contents of the bag: a gun and a ski mask. "Damn, dude," Brad gasped. "You already had this thing planned out?" Derek chuckled like a middle-aged dad. "Let's just say I had faith in my ability to persuade." You're going to be careful with that thing, right?" Trina's eyes widened as she pulled away from the gun. Derek lifted the gun and aimed it at his temple. Without a change of expression, he pulled the trigger, producing only a soft click. "No need, it's fake." After glancing at the clock, he tucked the bag under his t-shirt, then headed for the door. "All goes well, I won't even have to pull it out." Brad followed him. "Yeah, I better get back to the pirate ride myself." Before stepping out the door, he studied Trina's face. "You sure you're ready for this?" "You kidding me? I've been making slave wages here for 3 years. I'm ready." "Cool. See you at close." With 5 minutes of break time left, Trina took a seat at the table, but her nerves wouldn't let her stay there. She got up and paced for a while, breath heavy, hands in and out of her pockets. The quiet made her uneasy, made her think about all the things that could go wrong. Before she got to the door, she heard something behind her. A scratching sound. Faint, but definitely there. Similar to sandpaper scraping against something metallic. The rhythm was uneven, strange. A warning. She took cautious steps down the hallway till she reached the furnace, then opened it. Trina gasped, eyes wide. "Chris!" Her co-worker crouched in the cramped space, scrub brush in hand as he scraped at the floor. "Hi, Trina," he mumbled, eyes not meeting hers. "I just thought I'd take care of this on my break." Chris, have you been here the whole time?" "Yeah," he whispered. Trina's face went cold, her extremities too. She added everything up in her head, knowing exactly what he must have heard in the last 10 minutes. "So that means you heard us?" "I don't know what you mean," he said, scrubbing harder than ever. "What I mean is..." Chris scampered away, dropping the brush in the hallway. "I better get back." And he was gone. Trina stood there, still. This was bad news and she knew it. Chris wasn't the kind of employee that would be okay with this. Everything by the book, according to the rules. That was Chris. Shaking hands, quick breaths, she scooped the cell phone from her pocket and dialed. She tapped on the closet door like a military snare drum until she got an answer. "Yeah," Derek said. We've got a problem." "Like what?" "Like Chris," she said. "He was here in the furnace cleaning up when we were talking about stuff. Our plan for tonight." "Shit." "Exactly. You know it's only a matter of time before he tells Mitch, or maybe somebody higher up. My God, Derek, this is awful." Settle down, he said. "Now look, Mitch is gone for the day, so that means we've got until tomorrow morning to take care of things." She settled her body with a deep breath, but then thought about what he'd just said. "What do you mean, take care of things?" Derek added a trace of menace to his voice. "What do you think I mean?" "Derek, we can't." "We can and we will. Look, this is Chris we're talking about here. We cannot trust him to keep this a secret." "Maybe we should just call the whole thing off." "No, we're doing this. Trina, you've counted that money night after night. You know how much money there is at stake. Are you going to pass that up? When do you get another chance at this kind of cash? Here's the answer. Never. You pass this up and you will spend the rest of your life here, working at Uncle Ducky's, counting money that you have to hand to somebody else. Do you want that?" She fumbled for words, but found nothing. "Of course you don't. You're going to take this chance and you're going to run with it. Trina, we are going to do this, right?" "Okay." "Say it. Say the words. Say we are going to do this." Her breath settled, jaw looser, nerves calming down. "We are going to do this. Now get over here and make that call to the cops and we'll take care of Chris afterwards." "Got it." She hung up, hesitantly leaving the break room, not sure if she was more excited or scared. The call went flawlessly. The police bought the story, and within an hour they were counting their takings and preparing to leave for the night. Derek hovered over his co-worker as she counted it all. It was a weekend, so the money in the safe hadn't yet been taken to the bank. This meant the stolen booty included all profits made that week, not just the night's take. All told, it added up to close to $200,000. Trina counted it twice to make sure it was real. Did she really just make more in a few minutes than she'd normally make in a year? A decade? Derek and Trina walked out of the office to the nearly empty parking lot and spotted Brad on his way home. With a subtle wave, they brought him over. The three of them slipped to the side of the office where they could see co-workers putting the finishing touches on their day's work. Others headed home. Voices low, they nodded to the familiar faces that moved to the parking lot. "How'd everything go?" Brad asked. "We had a problem with our buddy over there," Derek said, nodding toward Chris, on his knees, cleaning out the fortune-teller booth. "Yeah?" "He heard everything," Trina said. Brad grunted like he'd been stabbed in the neck. "So, you guys think he might tell somebody?" "Don't worry," Derek said. "That's where you come in." "What do you mean?" "You're going to take him down to the pirate ride and make sure he doesn't tell anybody. Ever." Brad stared at his friend, not sure if he actually heard the words correctly. "Yes, that means what you think it means." Trina nodded in agreement, her eyes dead. "There's no other way," Derek said. "We do this, or we work in this hellhole forever." Brad checked his surroundings, smiled at his co-workers who passed by on their way to rusted pickup trucks, Hyundais, or the bus stop. He sent his gaze back to Derek and nodded weakly. "After that, we'll take him to the break room." "For what?" Trina asked. Derek moved his mouth to talk, but a friendly slap on his shoulder interrupted him. "See you tomorrow, dude!" Caught off guard, he steeled his nerves and replied to the passerby. Yeah, Keith." He turned back to Trina and Brad. "We'll talk about it then. Right now, let's just take care of step one. Got it, Brad?" Brad nodded and took slow, uneasy steps toward Chris. He stood there and watched for a second as his co-worker polished the handle on the door of the fake fortune-teller booth like it was a highly prized family heirloom. "Hey, Chris." Chris turned, then spoke softly and returned to his work. "Hi, Derek." "You know, Chris, there's something I was having a problem with at my ride. I know you used to work that ride for a while. The pirate ride should be easy to maintain. In fact, I worked there for nearly 4 years, and the only actual repairs it needed were to the boat itself, and those weren't substantial because the boat basically stays docked for the entire time." Brad said, "Yeah, I think it has something to do with the rudder. You think you can come over and take a look at it for me?" "Sure," Chris said, springing to his feet. Brad looked back to his friends before walking over to the pirate ride with Chris. Something about their glances told them everything was going to be okay. The ride was a small yacht modelled after a pirate ship. Once there, Chris knelt down, reaching under the boat, biting his lower teeth as he felt for something. He grunted, "Everything seems okay to me." As soon as his co-worker turned away, Brad took a careful glance around, finding nobody. Then he grabbed the back of Chris's head and pressed him under the water. His limbs flailed and he gargled frantically, his body growing stiff and spastic, bringing a storm of bubbles to the water's surface. He tried to press back against both of Brad's hands, but it was no use. He reached up, clawing and grasping, sending a final throaty growl into the water before his body went limp. No more bubbles. Brad was surprised at how easy it was. He didn't even need to check for a pulse. The way the body just lay there, lifeless, made it clear that his work was done. Trina and Derek were already on their way over, their faces grim. Neither of them looked at the body when they arrived. The three of them stood there, gazes aimed at the horizon. Just another day at work. "Let's take him to the office," Derek said. Uncle Ducky's was empty by the time Brad had finished with Chris, so their path to the office was clear, uninterrupted by surprises. Derek and Brad dragged him there while Trina opened the break room door, her eyes wide with horror over what she'd just been a part of. Or maybe it was excitement. "Okay," she said, catching her breath. "What's the next step?" Derek stood over Chris's prone body and nodded toward the furnace. "Our friend's got a hot date lined up." He chuckled over his dad joke, but nobody else did. "You sure we want to do this?" Brad asked. Derek shrugged. "We have to get rid of the body. You got a better idea?" Without another word of protest, Brad reached down, grabbed Chris's shoulder. He waited for Trina to grab the other. She stared at the furnace, remembering the scratching sound from earlier a little too vividly. "What's wrong?" Derek asked her. She looked down at the body, then back to the furnace. "Nothing, I guess. I just thought I'd heard something." They dragged the body to the furnace as Derek stepped around them and fired everything up. "Anybody asks, we don't know what happened to Chris. He just disappeared." He chuckled as the other two hoisted the body into the furnace. "You sure this is going to work?" Brad asked with a laboured grunt. "Sure," Derek said. "It may take a while, but I've got all night." Once they'd put him inside, Trina and Brad watched their friend slowly close the furnace door. Then they looked away simultaneously and stood there. "Great work, guys," Derek said. "Don't know about the two of you, but I don't plan on sticking around here anymore. I suppose I'll wait a few weeks, then quit. Don't want to raise too many suspicions." Unprompted, Trina pulled the bag from under her shirt and dumped the cash on the floor. They split it 3 ways, then left. Their only conversation revolved around ways they'd spend their money. After Trina and Brad left, Derek stayed most of the night, making sure his co-worker's corpse was unrecognizable. He went home, determined to leave the evening's deed in the past, but it wouldn't be that easy. A strange scratching sound in the distance kept him up all night. The trio came back a month later, an unofficial celebration of their freedom from a lousy workplace. Brad and Trina had quit roughly a week after their adventures with Chris. Derek had waited a week after that. With so many Uncle Dickie's employees drifting in and out on a regular basis, their sudden departure raised no red flags. Chris's abrupt departure raised a few, but those faded quickly enough. The police simply could not find a suspect, nor could they connect his disappearance to the robbery. When Trina, Brad, and Derek met up in the parking lot of Uncle Ducky's a month later, they struggled to keep smiles off their faces. "We did it and got away from it," they all wanted to scream, but in the end, they decided against such a brazen victory lap. "You guys ready to celebrate our liberation?" Derek asked as they wove through the crowded parking lot and towards the front gate. "Sure am," Trina replied. "Let's do it," said Brad. They clasped hands together on their way, a family reunited. Together they were ready to forget anything unpleasant had ever happened. But as the trio ambled inside, Chris was watching and waiting, and he remembered everything. After a stroll inside and past a few old friends, they headed first to Christy the Twisty, the ever-popular roller coaster. Trina stepped onto the ride, strapped the harness on, careful not to mess up her new hairdo and nails. She took a seat next to Brad and noticed for the first time his brand new shoes. "Ooh, leather," she purred. "I like them." "So do I," Brad answered, easing into his seat. He turned to Derek in the seat behind them, who was fastening a shiny new set of headphones to his ears. As Christy taxied up the first hill, the three of them shared a grin that wordlessly recognized their shared story. They had won. Against all odds, they'd done it. Yanked off guard, they released a collective shriek as the roller coaster sped down the first hill. It was a joy beyond joy, but it didn't last long. Climbing the second hill, the sound of the wheels clanking was replaced with something different, something weird. Trina heard an all-too-familiar scraping sound. Face slack and sheet white, she turned to Brad. Brad needed no explanation. His bugged eyes suggested he was hearing it also. Together, they turned to Derek behind them, whose stare skittered all over the place like a man under siege from something invisible. He frantically tried to raise from his seat, but couldn't because of the restraint tugging down his shoulders. When the ride lurched to the top of the next hill, he yanked off his headphones and screamed, his horrified howl somehow rising above all the other joyful screams. "We gotta get out of here!" By the ride's end, the three found themselves trying to wrench out of their restraints, drawing puzzled glances from fellow riders. Once freed from the shoulder straps, they leapt out from the coaster and elbowed through the crowd to the exit. After knifing into the parking lot, they stopped there and caught their breath. "Maybe it's a little too early," Trina said, "but it's hard to get that sound out of my head." Derek said, "Calm down, guys. We've got to be imagining it." He waited for validation on his theory. When none came, he asked, "Right?" Still nothing. Brad said, "Maybe we just need to get out of here. There's too much history here. That's all." "Yeah," Trina said. "Look, we don't work here anymore anyway. We don't have to come back. Let's just leave that memory behind and get on with our lives." They nodded together and stepped away without another word. Night had begun to fall, and things were slowing down at Uncle Ducky's. The silence was a little eerie, but the trio might have been even more spooked out if they'd been listening more carefully. They would have heard Chris laughing. In particular, he was amused by the idea that they could have left that memory behind them and gotten on with their lives. "Not a chance," he chuckled. Brad eased toward his new BMW, eyes shifting and ready for anything. Once in his seat, he waited for his nerves to settle before taking off. With a tremble in his hand, he struggled to get the key in the ignition, but he fought against it and started the car anyway, laughing to himself a little as he sped out of the parking lot. With his hands shaky on the steering wheel, he wanted to get home as quickly as possible, so he chose Highway 67, taking him over the Cedar River Bridge before getting back. The need for a fast exit grew as he heard the scraping sound echoing inside his car. He jabbed at the radio, flipping on a random station, then blasting the volume until the windows rattled. But that wasn't enough. The scrape kept coming. Louder, angrier. Pulse racing and sweaty hands struggling to stay on the wheel, he set his foot down on the gas, thinking he could somehow outrace the memories. But it wasn't going to be easy. Traffic was too clogged, the roads too bumpy. Everything blurred past him, doing almost 90. Tires screeching, he swept around everybody in his way, but a bang out of nowhere took his hands off the wheel and sent him spinning out of control. Cedar River was ahead, and losing control meant the risk of a watery grave, especially at this speed. But tapping his brakes wasn't an option with so many cars behind him, so he had to barrel ahead to the bridge, never mind the falling safety arm. Approaching the bridge and now doing 90, he found two new dangers, a cement truck backing out of a parking lot and heading straight for his windshield, and a sliver of space between two motorcycles. He skillfully wove himself away from the truck, undistracted by the driver's angry horn, then squeezed between the motorcycles, just making it onto the bridge as the safety arm fell right after him. Cocky grins stretched across his face, Brad released a sigh and looked back at the poor saps who didn't make it on. Losers, he thought. But he had dared, he and his two friends. That's why he was driving a BMW, and those losers weren't. Halfway over the bridge, he turned off his radio, unafraid of the scraping sound now. If he had to live with it, he had to live with it. Life was about danger, wasn't it? But as he neared the end of the bridge, something thumped against his hood. Too dark to see what, but it jarred him back into his seat, arms away from the wheel. Crashing through the side railing caught him off guard. The BMW took a nosedive into the water, splashing hard and heavy, then colliding with the riverbed until the dashboard met his chest like lightning. Everything happened too quickly. He was trapped before he knew it, legs crushed under the dashboard, torso around the seat. He flailed wildly, reaching for air just above him. He could jab his left hand out of the window and into the air. Pulling himself free wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. Yanking himself out of the car, he could bring his face above the water's surface. Once up, he gasped until his lungs burned, kept tugging himself higher and higher. Almost there. But his legs felt a downward tug, bringing everything back under the water. Mouth, eyes, elbows, then hands. He fought for air but found only bubbles, chest exploding in slow motion. His body went rigid. No more energy. No more life. He somehow twisted into a face-up position until his vision was washed with moonlight, rendered wavy by the water. Until somebody put the moon's light out. The scraping sound got louder and louder as Trina drove further and faster. She eyed other drivers on the road, wondering if they too could hear her, but got only looks of confusion. Maybe it would stop when she got home, or left the city, or the state. Maybe the key was getting far away from the nightmare, leaving it all behind. She heard a cackle from the back seat and looked into her rearview mirror. Chris was sitting there, face slanted by a grin. But when she turned, he wasn't there anymore. Derek choked the steering wheel until his hands nearly blistered. This wasn't happening. It couldn't have been. Doing at least 10 miles per hour past the speed limit, his eyes bounced along the landscape, scanning every distant bush, every crevice and crack between trees. That scratching sound had to be coming from somewhere.
This has been Zoom Horror, written by Stories from the Attic, narrated by Robin McConnell, copyright 2020 by Michael Vandervoort, production copyright by Michael Vandervoort.
He figured it would be best to focus on the good things in life, his new car, his new life. Why focus on the negatives? Why worry about that nagging, scraping sound reminding him how his new life became possible? It was best to move on. Forget the past. He nodded to the ponytailed dork in the Toyota he passed, knowing that doofus had to be envying his new car. Then it was time to zip past him, weaving his way through I-94 in a way that was only possible with a Ferrari. Derek wiped sweat from his neck and jaw, smirking at those he passed, wondering what his life might have been like if he hadn't taken the chance he'd taken. AC/DC faded from his speakers and was replaced by Jimi Hendrix crooning another badass tune that filled his car. Derek wailed along as he cranked the air conditioner to the max, then wondered if he could turn it even higher. He groaned in disapproval, sliding his left hand up his t-shirt and flapping to cool himself down. Great car, he thought to himself, but it'd be nice if it wasn't so hot. Trina's tight face loosened into a grin when she spotted the exit up ahead. Almost home. She could breathe again, slacken her grip on the steering wheel. Maybe she could get help someday, find one of those high-priced shrinks who could convince her those sounds weren't real. There had to be a way out, and Trina was determined to find it. She laughed to herself as she flicked on her turn signal and moved toward the upcoming exit. Almost home, she thought. Almost free. Now shirtless, Derek took choppy, panicked breaths. He rolled down the Ferrari's windows and scowled to those who laughed at him in the cars he passed. What the hell was so funny? He mouthed at those losers, people driving shitty used cars laughing at him. Soon he found himself steering into the right lane, headed to the upcoming exit, only a few fingers on the overheated wheel. He swallowed hard and reached for his glove compartment, recalling that he'd stashed a few beers in there. Ouch! His hand reflexively snapped away from the glove compartment's searing hot handle. He grabbed the t-shirt he'd tossed onto his passenger seat, wrapped it around his hand, then tried the handle a second time. Still hot, but his makeshift oven mitt worked enough for him to click open the glove compartment. Once open, Flames shot through it, sending him back into the driver's seat, eyes the size of $half. The flames reached his t-shirt and erupted into a bigger fire, and within seconds, smoke was everywhere. He needed to get out of the car, away from the flames. If only he could reach the exit soon enough. Trina felt better now, relaxed. The scraping sound was still there, but it had faded into the background like a neighbour's barking dog you no longer noticed after a few weeks. Better news still. She no longer saw Chris in the rearview mirror. She turned, scanning the back seat just to make sure. It was empty. No more Chris, no more cackling, no more memories. But, turning back, she unloaded a shriek, body going stiff. Flames shot through a Ferrari ahead of her, erupting to a nightmare 20 feet ahead, then 10 feet. Slamming on the brakes wouldn't be enough. She was nearly standing on the pedal, spine arched, limbs stretched, but she was seconds away already. Spinning away also didn't work. She landed in the middle of the mess as screams, honked horns, and screeching tires threaded between the scratching sound. On contact, pain was everywhere, stabbing through Trina's body, and her thoughts, and her soul. The world left her a broken mess, with only one thought. I couldn't get away. This has been The Haunting, a short, scary story. Written by Stories from the Attic. Narrated by Robin McConnell. Copyright 2020 by Michael van der Voort. Production copyright by Michael van der Voort.